Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Um, so this is another episode of A Studio of One's Own, which is a series of weekly online dialogue sessions that seeks to reach out to the quiet corners of Southeast Asia and catch up with artists on their changing creative routines now that they are being confined to their home space. And so we have Alecia Neo today here with us, and she's a Singaporean contemporary artist whose socially engaged practice unfolds primarily through photography, video, installations, and participatory workshops that addresses modes of radical hospitality, mobility, and caregiving to explore issues of identity and the search of self. Before we begin, I guess, can we check in on how you've been doing and how what you've been doing to keep yourself busy this quarantine?
Yeah, um, hmm. so actually when the COVID-19 first started, right, I must say that the beginning phase was extremely difficult because there were a lot of projects that we were so excited about that all got cancelled. Like they literally some projects we were in the midst of it and then it got cancelled. And then I had some other projects which I may have been really working on the proposal for a really long time, and then it was supposed to be an exhibition, and I was like really disappointed, I must say, when it got cancelled. So I must say that the first few weeks were quite heartbreaking on many levels. Yeah, I was a little bit depressed, and also we have in our platforms. So I co-founded two platforms. One of them is Bragg, and the other one is Unseen Art Initiatives, which really evolved from a project with students, right? So that particular project, I think, was also quite disappointing during the COVID period because we were trying to support these two wonderful emerging artists. One of them is a visually impaired performer who's very very talented. Name is Claire, and so we are supporting that project, and it's been like a long time developing the proposal of efforts put into it. But then now, because of COVID-19, and their proposal is precisely about touch and voice. Yes, so it's it was a real double whammy. So so we had a lot of issues with that, but we're still as time went by, I think we all sort of pulled up our socks and are trying to adapt and also make sense of the situation. But I think it's quite important for us not to rush into anything, especially for art practice. It's difficult to do because it's also our livelihood. But I think one thing I'm glad is that the young artists, they also understand that they really care about their work and they want to do it right. Yeah, so there's been a lot of adjustments during this time.
That's true. I think when you mention all the events being cancelled, almost as if seems like there's the pandemic brought about this worldwide pause or an interruption to all these official events. And it's important to kind of look back into the archives or just refine and tweak the work, because I think that's so important to the creative process as well. And I know that your work is very collaborative in nature, and it involves a lot of activity. So how did you adapt to that creative process now that you've been confined to your own space?
Yeah, so it's really funny because when you guys first sent me the invitation, then I thought, oh my God, this is so uncanny because it's Virginia Woolf and Room of One Soul, and precisely that was the text that I was looking at when I was developing my project. Yeah, so one of the projects that I was working on that became a digital project completely, I had to reimagine the whole work is Ramatama. So it's a project that was recently presented by the Asian Civilizations Museum, and so it's for the Heritage Festival. So originally it was meant to be an immersive installation, but because of COVID-19, I thought to myself, okay, if now we have to really rethink the whole project, what makes sense for the work. Because the project I was doing was looking at hospitality rituals in our region in Southeast Asia. So I looked at beetle culture. So looking at beetle chewing,
Wow.
and also how is the beetle leaf used in certain coming of age rituals. Also how did women practice this over time? How did the ritual change over time? So I was looking at this like before COVID started, when I was doing my residency at NTUCCA. And then, when I had to adapt it, it was really, I must say, very challenging for the collaborations, because I was working with two performers. One of them is a dancer. The other one is also, she does theater. And then I was also working with Chong Li Chuan, who's a composer, and also Kai, who's my DP, and actually all these sort of imagining how it would actually work for the filming had to be done digitally. So there was a lot of communication. A lot of the rehearsals had to be done
via
digitally.
Zoom?
Yes, via Zoom. So actually, it's really. I must say that. It was a challenge that I think everybody tried to work with, and we tried our best to communicate clearly. And eventually, we also had to work with the safety protocols, to actually do the shoot. So that was quite difficult. Yeah.
So you guys had to, eventually when phase 2 opened up and you were able to meet in real life for the shoot, it still had a lot of complications, right, with the way the rehearsals went about. But I'm glad that you guys managed to still have that physical shoot, because it's important.
It was difficult. It's an understatement.
I can
because
imagine.
Everything was in flux. We had to be emailing a lot of people, asking for approvals, and then at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty. Sometimes they are also, people in various institutions, they are working out what's the best approval. But I must say that I was very thankful, because I think there were certain locations they were looking at. I was actually honestly surprised that they were very efficient in terms of like responding. So that was really helpful. Yeah, and we have now the Singapore Association for Motion Pictures, right? And the team is amazing. I have to give a lot of props to the folks there, for really helping the industry out. I think I'm so thankful that there was this platform, that I could bombard with all my questions and get a response. So that was very helpful. Yeah.
Wow. It really reveals, how much, how quick we really need to adapt, because it's so hard. You can plan so long for something, and the fact that this has happened now, just really, it's like relearning a whole new way of communicating with people and creating art. So that's really admirable. So when you I'm just thinking, when you were liaising with so many people within the creation of this video project, how do you think it revealed something to you about art in Singapore in general, and how this whether or not this virtual spaces of online communication is it could potentially be an alternative to the way we work as artists?
Well, I think for me, I think what has become quite useful, I think, in this time, is because now we are not just having groups who are not technologically advanced, or they don't have access to this technology, right? So it's not just these groups anymore. A lot of people have to get on this platform. So I think that has opened up a lot of opportunities for remote working. So now we're actually able, much more able to collaborate with certain international partners, which we previously, that it might have a lot of more barriers, or there's a lot more resistance to that. But then these days, even some of the young people that I'm working with, say some of the students who are living with vision impairment, they are also within their schools, they're being exposed to certain kind of Zoom and technology and all, and they're trying to learn. Of course, it's there's a lot more legwork to get them to really use these platforms in a more sophisticated way. But I think there's a start. There's a stronger push now. So I think there's quite a lot of potential there. And then also, with with our platform BRAC, I think we are also trying to experiment with precisely this virtual space.
Yes.
And what does it mean to share space? Yeah, so
Right.
actually one of our current research focus is actually looking at acts of gathering during times of conflict and disruption. And I'm working with very closely with my co-leads, Javon Chandra and Keith Franklin, who are both artists in, with backgrounds in music and also performance. And so recently for our research, we during COVID, we actually experimented with a series called The Making of a Meal. So the idea was to use this simple prompt as a start as a springboard to discuss, what does it mean to share space, and we're looking at the domestic space because now that everyone's confined at home, how does this simple task or this simple prompt actually invite a lot of discussions of the challenges of that? Because it's true, when we had certain participants who signed up for this sort of intimate gathering, virtual gathering. So the invitation was to cook a meal that you have to share, and then join us for dinner virtually. And then actually you'll be surprised how difficult it is to do this task. For some people. Yeah, like access to the kitchen is actually difficult. Some people don't have the access to that, and in terms of like how are they, which space are they using during the dinner? Is there going to be interruptions? Yeah, so we had like a conversation about that, and I think moving forward, we're also looking at taking this idea of gathering further. So we're actually hosting a couple of other projects. The next series is called On Your Terms. Yeah, so we're looking at how do you host, and who's the host? Who is your unlikely host, and we're actually quite excited about this. That's going to be the next phase of this Two Gathering series.
Wow, that sounds so exciting. I think like I'm really intrigued by your exploration of spaces because like we cannot really like ignore these four walls anymore. Like having been in the circuit breaker, we're just confined in a space, and like we're really having to like re-navigate the spaces that we really like inhabit. So beyond just space also, I think like time is something that we have to re-navigate now that we are being like, I feel like our calendars are in limbo and things like that. So I was wondering how you as an artist like see your how your perspective on space has been changed, and how that has translated in maybe the way you revisit your old works, and like what you said about the BRAC series, how that has also impacted your future projects.
Well, I think definitely as an artist, right, I think I'm someone who really likes to work in specific sites. I feel like that has been very important to me. Like I like to for people to have an immersive experience in space. So which is why when the exhibition got cancelled, I was like, oh my god, like I was incredibly disappointed. But I think in terms of space, now that we are moving into this digital realm, and also a lot of people are imagining projects online, I think it's still important to look at this medium, because even now our conversation is mediated through this computer camera, right? So I think if we are making any kind of work, I think it should also address the medium which we're telling these stories through. So I would say that with our projects at BRAC, we are now attempting to also look at how this change in communication, this change of presenting ideas of gathering would affect the work. So I think that's also important, that this transition is not just a very straightforward one. We also
it's like beyond just like putting information online, and it's really like taking advantage of this medium as space as a medium.
Yeah, Exactly. And so I think if it's done that way with a lot more thought, and I think artists are now really pushing boundaries as well, and thinking of really innovative ways uh, to provoke certain kind of unexpected relationships with this digital medium, because I mean we are all literally performing for this.
Yes.
I can look at myself as I'm talking to you, so it's also interesting, right?
Yes.
How does it change? We talk to each other. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think in especially with my work, my collaborative work with Bragg and
Mm.
my team members, right? I think that's exactly what we're interested in. How our formats of gathering transformed
Right.
through these different exchanges with the host and the space as well.
Yeah. Well, I think like when we think of space and how it's transformed, it's very apt to bring up your past work, home visits, because you literally interrogate and not interrogate, but you visit and you experience these spaces that are so intimate to the subjects of your photography. So do you mind sharing a little bit about how that work was created, and how I would say it's quite applicable now when everyone is being surrounded by just their home space 24/7. Yeah.
Mm. Actually, it's interesting because I think that work. So it was made in 2009 and 2010. So
Yeah.
um, the home visits was really I would say a very simple work that I wanted to do to basically reach out to very different people living in my neighborhood. So I
Mm.
live in Queenstown, and actually I think for me this idea of connection has always been very important. So the journey of making that work was precisely this attempt to move beyond my own
Mm.
circumstances or my own sort of networks and
Right.
enter one that belongs to somebody else. Yeah, so I think that the sort of um, relationship that I had with the people that I photographed is quite different from how I work these days. Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
at the time I think I was very interested in a very short encounter. What might it be
Yes.
like to meet someone um, who you don't know and get invited into their personal private space. So
Mm.
what would that encounter mean, and what might it develop into? So in some cases, some of the people that I photographed, you start a chain reaction, right? Because this person can no
Yes.
longer be a stranger to you, and so I think there's a beauty in these small encounters. But I would say that now my work is quite different. So
Mm-hmm.
I usually involve my participants a lot more collaboratively in the process. Yeah,
Yes.
so that was a start for me.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's great to see how like that has transitioned, and now you being more involved and like, engaged with the people that you work with is very interesting as well. And okay, I mean, since you mentioned how the work that exhibition showcase that you're working with the two artists really was heavily dependent on like touch and sensing, and like contrastingly, we see the art world in its entirety just move to this online platform. Like exhibitions are held on websites, in videos. I know that NTU ADM's grad show was like a website, and yeah, etc. So how do you think this this new space is going to be like? Do you think this trend is something that will endure in the future, even past this COVID pandemic? And whether or not you feel like as a media artist, because your work is very much media based but still deals with a lot of like tangibility and like performative aspects, so how do you think that will transform, or whether or not you feel like this is a trend that you will may subscribe to in the future as an artist?
I mean, I think that for sure, there's going to be a lot more digital works. That's for sure. I
Mm.
think it can only get more and more innovative. I think there's going to be exciting things to look out for there. But I don't think I don't for a second think that it's going to replace other forms of
Right.
experiences. I think that there's a real human need to physically touch somebody else or physically engage with materials. I don't think there will be a replacement for that. So I
For
think people
sure.
are still going to continue innovating in different realms. So this just opens another chapter. And I
Right.
myself, I'm actually excited to see, what I could possibly do in that virtual space as well. But I don't think it's going to take away from other kinds of works that I would make.
Yes. Okay, wow. That's really interesting. I think as artists, it's in Singapore, especially when, art is clearly, I mean, we recently read the poll that stated art, labeled art as non-essential. Having this shift to an online space may perhaps, make it more accessible to people who are not willing to pay the money and travel to an art gallery or a certain space. Um, but yeah, you're right. I don't think it will ever replace like that physical interaction with the work. Especially, I think your work at the Pasir Panjang power station was like extremely immersive, and there's no way that a digital experience can kind of like replace that. You know,
Mm.
yeah. But I was
Did you go for the show?
I didn't. I missed it, and it was at Pasir Ris.
Oh
But
man, okay.
I know I really regretted it, but yeah, like I mean that's the kind of thing that you have to be there to really experience,
Yeah.
and but it is interesting. Yeah, maybe you can share a little bit more about the creation of that work, because I'm sad I didn't get to see.
No, I think it's, to be honest, I think the first time we staged the work in the place, right? So Goethe Institute was actually the one that brought me, Li Chuan, and Deborah Emanuel together. And I think that was really a wonderful collaboration for me. And at the time, I think the timing of their presentation was also quite significant, because
Yeah.
the government literally soon after our during that period when we were developing the work, they announced the development of the Greater Southern Waterfront development. So the whole area is going to change massively, and so I think it was quite significant to be able to contribute like a small work during that time in that specific space. And also the first time we staged it in 2019 was it was actually, I think, quite a bold move by Goethe, because it was a single show. So we were like literally the only act in such a wonderful site, right? And
Yeah.
so we did two performances, one that
And it's a huge space, right?
Huge space.
Huge.
And the thing is, we only had the chance to recce the location just once. And then we had to go and make the work. And then the setup was literally the day before the performance. So I mean, a lot of the actual sort of imagination of how the space would be used and the scale of it. I mean, I think that was something that I was like, really quite worried about initially. But what was special to me was, because it's the power station, and this building literally, for decades, it powered our island, and then after, the Jurong Power Station and all this were built, with better capabilities, right? Then it was decommissioned in 87. So that's 30 over odd years ago, right? And the idea that this space was, dormant, it's used for some storage, but it's dormant, it's emptied out, and it also has no electricity inside. So we literally, the idea was to reactivate the space by bringing power into the space. And so the work is called Power to the People. And what I did with that was I was also collecting interviews from former workers who actually used to work in this space, and also their families who lived in the workers' quarters just next to the power station. So there are literally generations of immigrants who are staying there. But now if you go there, like right before our show, actually the blocks have been demolished. So so actually it's really quite poignant, because we know through the interviews, we also learned that a lot of the women and the children who stayed in the quarters just next to this power station, right? They've never actually been inside the power station. Yeah,
Oh,
because it's such a
really?
well-protected space. It's really, public utility is so important. It was very well
Yes.
guarded. Yeah, so
Guarded,
only
yeah.
the workers had access to it. So for us,
Oh,
during the show, when some of the people that we interviewed could enter the space and see
enter.
for themselves, this was where my father worked, and this is
Wow.
where it is, even though it's completely emptied out inside. I
Yeah.
think there was that kind of really poignant moment for some of these family members.
Mm,
And so the work, sort of some of the recordings of the interviews were interwoven into Deborah's
mm.
text. So Deborah wrote her own text
Spoken
that was
word.
inspired. Yeah, her spoken poetry that was inspired by these stories. But I think what we
Mm,
wanted to say, as three artists was really, what is it like, to be a work, what's the future of work? What's our relationship
mm.
and the value to that? Yeah, so that's really what we were trying to experiment with in this project.
Yeah. That's great. Like to hear, I guess, the real stories of the people who were living around that space and to to just interact with the space itself and fill it up with those lights. It was like it's really such a beautiful work. Um and I think yeah, like when we think of artists and the role of being translators of these stories, I feel like it's so important, especially in a place in Singapore where we're often so like blind to the real like these voices that go hidden or like they just go unspoken. And like all the more in a pandemic, like we have artists that are so important in telling the stories or just depicting them from their own lenses. And so I have another question for you on what do you think the role an artist should play in a global crisis like this?
Mm.
Considering the fact that the public do not view us as or view artists as an essential career, right? Beyond that, like beyond just like the amount of money that they should be making at a time like this, just like what do you think artists should be able to contribute?
I mean, I think that in a in a crisis situation, I think even artists themselves also question whether what
Mm,
we do is essential. I think it's not just a public opinion, but I think artists are also reflecting on their own work, the relevance of their work, and what they want to say during this time. So I
yeah.
I think that I mean I can't say for other artists, but I think for like my personal work and also our work at BRAC,
Yeah.
it's always been this relationship with ourselves and the
Mm,
position that we take in society. How do we create projects, or how do we create work that really answers to this power relationship?
yeah.
How does it actually offer opportunity to more people? How does it open up access to essential services? How
Mm-hmm.
does it open up relationships to the other, what we consider the other? So I think it has always been about that, sort of reversing certain relationships, or reversing the kind of attitudes towards you know say marginalized groups, or
Yeah.
people's stories who are remain unseen, or unheard and misunderstood. So I think
Mm,
artists can play that role, in terms of like you said,
mm,
translating. How are we actually uh, opening up opportunities for people to look at a situation from a different lens. I think that has
mm.
always been the artist's role and gift. I mean, it's a huge statement, to say, whether one is essential or not in this
It is.
in this
Yeah.
world. But I think it also is a position of humility, right? To really, if you start to really look at what you do. Do you actually, as an artist, practice what you preach? Do you also embody the values and the ethics that you wish for the world? So I think that's
Yes.
something that we try to ask, and invite conversations about that, because I think it's really important to be exposed to viewpoints and mindsets that are foreign to you. I think that's the only way you grow through that discomfort. So I think this period has been really interesting, with everything that's happening, Black Lives Matter, and also the discussions of race in Singapore. Now I think a lot of resources are emerging digitally as well, so the access is there to the information. People are talking about these tools, they're talking about these resources. So the question is then, now with this knowledge, then what are you going to do about it? And as artists, how can we use it in our work? And it's not just artists, right? I think even for institutions or any kind of arts company, art space, I think now is the perfect time to do your own so-called internal audit of your practices, right? I mean, there's so much things, I mean, even within us, we were a very small team, and I think we constantly we can do better, or this situation is not okay. What can we do, or how can we, within our means, do our part? I think that's still crucial.
Yeah, that's very relatable. I think in the crisis now, especially with art institutions that are constantly pushing out content, it's important to just take a step back and reevaluate whether what is going to be helpful for the society at this point. So wow, thank you for sharing that. That sounds great. I wanted to ask you about you previously mentioned that you're currently working with you have more access at least to international companies that you wouldn't have worked for, and I think we now know that the borders are currently closed or have been much tighter because of the COVID pandemic. And I'm interested to know what you think about I'm interested to know how you see us being able to sustain cross-cultural sharing of experiences, despite having this inability to travel, especially since I know that a lot of you have completed a lot of residencies overseas, and that's also where you get a lot of insight from. So how do you think we can continue to have that cross-cultural change?
I mean, I think one thing that has been useful right now is that I see the emergence of a lot of labs, a lot of film labs, artist labs, which are which now involve remote collaboration. So one of our collaborators at BRAC, our team members, Javon, he's actually involved in a collaboration with the US, theater makers from the US, and they're doing everything on Zoom. So it's quite nuts, right? So in Singapore, they'll be, I don't know if they're taking the morning slot, and I don't know who's taking the morning or the night slot, but basically there's this opportunity that came out because of COVID, right? So I think that's interesting also, I think certain collaborations where normally, people might think, oh, if I had to fly somebody over, then, cost is going to be an issue, right? Blah, blah, blah. And then, so that might, again, limit who I would pick for this. But then now, people can work remotely. And I think, people are able to, I guess, use their own platforms even more, the desire to have, that your own platform can be legitimate. I think that is also very helpful. Yeah, so I'm actually quite excited about certain. I signed up for some of these webinars and labs myself.
Wow.
I'm actually quite excited to be meeting some people who are I've never had the chance to engage with, and then now we're able to. So I think and recently, I mean, I just wanted to also say Professor Ong Kintin and Nolina from T-Works, they recently organized a really wonderful seminar, which really had such a wonderful audience, international audience, and they had the curating lab. So I think that was very, very fruitful for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how like it took a global pandemic for us to realize that we don't need to fly to the States to attend like a talk there, and it's great that like all these I guess more connections are easily formed now that we have gotten over the fact that we need to physically be present, and yeah, it sounds interesting that I mean, I think about how this can potentially facilitate. I mean, even when borders are open, like this, we can facilitate more cross-cultural experiences between artists of different countries. Um, okay, so I guess I'll just end off with one last question, which is for artists who are looking to embark on social projects in the community, what advice would you give them as someone who experiences and works with a lot of these people?
I think for me, I think for any artist who's wanting to start working this way, I think one of the crucial steps is to really do your research well. And I think it's very important to also meet up and have exchanges with artists who you feel like you want to be working in that direction, and to get some advice for them, because I think that sort of exchange is very crucial, instead of like
Yes.
starting on a blank slate. I think a lot of artists, myself included, have always benefited from the work from the previous generation, and their advice. So I think that has been something that I feel is very crucial for any artist before starting. It's really important to go and do your groundwork, find out who has already been doing similar work that you want to do, and then
Yes.
learn from them, and then try to make it your own. So I think that part is a must step. Your starting point, yeah, and also really talking to the people that you want to work with, before having sort of preconceived ideas of engagement, or preconceived ideas of what you think is lacking in the community, or that you want to intervene. I think it's really important to hear from the people that you want to work with themselves,
Yes.
and to really have a
Definitely.
sense of the space, and your position with it. And I think it's also one thing I want to say is, I think with any project, it's very important to know why you are personally interested in this
Right.
work.
Right.
Why are you so interested in this topic? What is it about it that is important to you? And I think when you can answer it simply, and
Yes.
I think that's when the project will naturally grow in a meaningful way. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Alicia. I really enjoyed our discussion. I think like I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for joining us again. And is there anything else you would like to add?
um at the moment, I can't really think of anything. I really enjoyed our conversation too. I don't At the moment, I can't really think of anything, but no. I think
Okay,
I'm
don't worry about it. Thank you,
okay.
Alicia.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kim.